And welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. And I'm your host, Bobby Carpenter. Anthony Schlegel, who normally accompanies me. Well, if you were out yesterday, well, you must have missed it, but he is cruising around the country with his son. So it's his son's graduation. Said, "Hey, Bob, I'm going to be out of here. We're making memories." I said, "All right, Schlegs, I hate you for leaving me for the week, but hey, what else am I going to do? I found a way to do it from Gitmo. You can't find a way to do it from a cruise, even though we've done it before. But they have excursions apparently and a lot of stuff that they have going on. So you know what? I'm going to give him a little bit of grace. He doesn't need to have too much, but just a little smidge there, ultimately to see, make sure he has some time with his family before he moves back here, and then we'll be able to do some real fun stuff and some things together. So excited for that. Excited for the show today. Talked a lot of house settlement stuff yesterday, how that looked. We're going to be joined by Bill Bender today, dive into a little bit of that, talk some future college football stuff, a little bit of the Michigan news there. Obviously, we didn't get into that very much yesterday, so we'll get into that a little bit more moving forward with this, just to kind of see what that potentially could look like, when that will come down and everything else. So dive on into that as well. So excited to talk about that. But now, once you have the house settlement and Judge Claudia Wilken approved that, and as we start getting into the details of everything today and everything that's going on, um, and what's everything that's going on, $2.7 billion provisions for the athletic departments to oversee their student athletes' NIL earnings. Ohio State Athletic Department with Ross Bjork. And listen, they've been working on this for a while. I know, people giving Ross some crap about the South Stands things. I mean, they're trying to find solutions. And they've talked about making a commitment. He's having a press conference tomorrow or Thursday to talk about all this around 1:00. And what they're able to do now is bring all the NIL stuff under one roof, and how that's ultimately going to look. So they're going to do that. Now there's still going to be some other lanes for some other stuff that's out there. And we'll talk about that, but they've been working on this for a while. And with the anticipation that this settlement was going to get approved in some form, there was going to probably be some changes and some stipulations and things that moved around the margins. That's always the case. But they were trying to prepare for what they thought the meat and potatoes of this was. And with that was the ability then to bring in NIL under house. Because here's the problem, what they had, and this was the problem, folks, with how it was running is, the football program underneath the athletic department over here. They're like operating their own little entity. The way the laws are written in different state laws and the NCAA rule, like you couldn't really commingle. And then they said you could, but you still had to stuff have outside of the silo of the athletic department. So you had your athletic and football over here, and you have these guys over here. And so it's just constant calls going back and forth. And the football program really wasn't able to administer, or the athletic department couldn't administer, the NIL payments and things that all had to come from third party, and you lose a lot of control. And so with giving up that control, you also give up some liability as well, where you're promising things, but if something doesn't happen, there's always the plausible deniability of, hey, they didn't get it done. It's not on me. You can give them one of these things like my kids do. Well, whose was it? I don't know. Is it hers? Is it yours? Is it theirs? Well, is it friends? Okay. No one knows. Keystone Cops. And so that's where you had some of this ambiguity. And remember we talked about Jaden Rashada down at Florida. They promised all this money. You go down there and then ultimately it's not there. Well, the booster's like, well, I don't want to pay that. Apparently he's not as good as I thought. Well, we promised it to him and everything else. And it was just another avenue in there that made it more complicated and more complex. And so Ohio State's been working on a way, really since the inception of this, of what it would look like should they be able to bring it in-house. And so as we throw this up here and start talking about the Buckeyes doing 11 Warriors put together a pretty good deal, talking about it. The Buckeyes have announced with the athletic department that in combination with Learfield, who is their marketing partner on the athletic side, Buckeye Sports Group, or BSG. BSG, what it's going to do is consolidate the existing NIL collectives, namely the 1870 Society and the foundation, into one NIL management team within the athletics department. So the founding members of both collectives will serve in advisory roles, And so we had the 1870 Society, and then we had the foundation, which a lot of that was run by Brian Schottenstein and Cardell Jones. And what they're able to do now is bring them in. They've got a dedicated team of leaders to serve under the athletic departments to, quote, maximize brand value and support and streamline enhance NIL opportunities per the release from OSU Athletics and Learfield. Said, quote, Ohio State has always been a leader in college athletics, and this initiative is another step forward to build upon our strong NIL foundation. Said Ohio State Deputy Athletic Director Kerry Hoyt via the release. By combining the power of our athletic brand with Learfield's expansive network, we're able to create a fully innovative one-service approach to NIL that directly benefits our student athletes. So BSG is going to have access to the Learfield Compass NIL technology through their partnership, which is used to help combine players and their brand deals with their interests. Its partnership is centered on a comprehensive strategy. It's going to provide student athletes with financial literacy, resources, all these different things. It's going to serve all 36 varsity sports. But in reality, it's designed for the football program, men's basketball, and maybe a couple of the other teams. So that's where that's coming from, and that's how that'll look. And it's actually it's pretty genius because it eliminates that third rail. And so you're gonna have people in there. In Learfield, this is what they do. You know, they sell sponsorships, and now they have access to the current players to be able to get their name, image, and likeness involved in the sponsorship with everything else that's going on. So this will be a much more seamless process. It'll be easier on recruiting. And what this does is we talked about the $20.5 million yesterday. Like every team, every school and their athletic department can spend $20.5 million on players year one. And that number's going to go up, and people estimate it'll be around $30 million by the final year, the 10th year of this settlement agreement. But outside of that, as we talked, there's going to be a clearinghouse that they're going to have, and they're going to have to vet these deals and if it's over $600, it has to get approval to make sure that it's full market value and everything else. And so what this is going to do is Ohio State will be able to pay the players $20.5 million between their sports and divide that up. And I'm guessing 75% of it it's probably going to go to football, maybe 15% to basketball, and 10% sprinkle around other sports. Those have been kind of benchmarks that have been used. And we'll get into some of the other stuff because people start talking about Title IX. Well, this is what Judge Claudia Wilkin approved as the back payment of the $2.8 billion that has to be paid. That's how the breakdown is going to go. And so a lot of people have taken the liberty of that and said, well, if that's what we're paying before, if she deemed that to be the market value of the different players and the programs, well, then that's what we can allocate moving forward. Now, some schools are being a little more aggressive, saying, look, this program brings in this amount of revenue, so we're going to spend this much on it. And if it's 80%, we'll spend 80% on football. If it's 85, we'll spend 85. Whatever it's going to be. We'll deal with it in court later. We'll figure it out if that's a Title IX violation. But they've kind of outlined that's the difference with Title IX and market value. Like Title IX is equal opportunities for everybody, not equal outcomes, but equal opportunities. And the market value is you get paid what you are worth. So I don't know if those two things are ever going to be able to align exactly how people like them. So there's always going to be someone that's a little upset. But what this Buckeye Sports Group does is, if we do some quick back of the napkin math, say 75% just to make it easy, 20 million instead of 20 and a half. You're talking about roughly $15 million, maybe 16 if they have 20 and a half and you can bump it a little. That would be dedicated to football. Conversation was had last year that there was $20 million that was paid to the football roster. Is that true? Is it high? Is it low? It's probably somewhere in that ballpark. And now you start hearing places like Texas are spending 40. Texas Tech is maybe spending a little more. We'll get into that and some different things and how this could change the landscape and what it's going to look like. But if you start thinking that, well, that's automatically a $5 million shortfall, assuming those numbers are accurate, which I just say they're pretty close. Where does that $5 million come from? And then on top of that, that number is going to grow. of what is needed because nothing ever goes down. Now, I understand the number is going to grow that you're able to pay out every year, but generally, I feel like the player's salary, the player compensation is going to be greater than just what they're allowed to pay them in the pool. And so you've got to find a way to modify that shortcoming and how that's going to look. So that's the thing that they've got to figure out. And that is what BSG is going to be ready to do. And they're there to not only provide the 5, but hey, if you can get 10 to the players, because people have these legitimate marketing brands. And so with this, they can have the Ohio State marks and guys can wear their jerseys and different things as long as that's all approved. That'll be able to fall in there, and that's going to be a big part of it. And so that is the other rail to where we've got the 15. How do we get 5 plus? And the good news is you'll be able, the younger guys coming in, well, they're probably not going to qualify for a lot of the stuff from BSG, the market value things, because nobody really wants to pay true freshmen. Like that's the reality. How many true freshmen have really come in and made a difference in the last 10 years? You got Jeremiah Smith. And there's some other guys that have played and been impactful, but not to be household names like that. And even Jeremiah Smith, it took till the end of the year. But now you might see teams hyping up guys earlier in their careers, trying to put them, get some publicity around them, because to do that, then they'll have a greater level of marketability. But that's what the BSG is going to do, and it's going to be more integrated. It'll be easier, so coaches can say, "Hey, we're looking at this." Mark Pantoni over there, general manager, very difficult job in today's day and age. Say, "Okay, Jeremiah Smith, you're getting X number of dollars. Let's say $2 million, $3 million. I don't know what the number is, but it's got 7 figures. We're going to be able to pay you out of our 14 or 15 or 16 million. We can pay you 2. And we can also talk to BSG, and they're pretty confident they're going to be able to get you another 3 and 3.5 or what, or like on top to make it whole. They'll get you another million and a half to get you 3.5. How does that sound? And so that's how now they're going to be able to work together to be able to get that done. And one of the other things that people have brought up with this is like the gifts in kind. How do they quantify dealer cars? If you're getting an apartment at a discount or free rate, like does that factor into some of this NIL? Because those are things that, depending on how they're claimed, I mean, they can also be untaxed benefits, maybe not fully legally, but those are other things that are advantageous for this. And so that's why the creation of this. And I know it took a long time and it was arduous. And I'm kind of glad Schlegs wasn't here to interrupt, because I've read through this pretty thoroughly, and I've had some some strong conversations about trying to figure it out, what it's going to look like. And I think they feel pretty good about everything with this. But that's how it's ultimately going to. I mean, come on, Joe. In the chat, Tate Martell had the greatest stat line in OSU history as a freshman. That is true. I think he was like 10 for 10 for like 71 yards or something, but he didn't necessarily have the impact that you need and to become a face and a household name. And sometimes you're going to see guys, maybe if they're local recruits, that may have more marketability earlier in their career because people know who they are because they remember them from high school. Guys in state may have a greater level of marketability. And so hopefully Learfield, if you're a guy from Cleveland or a guy from Dayton or Cincinnati, they'll be able to set you up with marketing opportunities there as well. So I think that's what the big vision of this ultimately looks like and what they're trying to achieve. But there's a lot there. And we're going to hear more and more about this. And I know that it can kind of I know that it's going to be a little arduous at times, but this is the thing. When you're working through something like this that's never been done, nobody truly knows how to operate it and how what's going to be allowed, what's not going to be allowed. And so we're going to see stuff trickle through this, and you're going to see things that are red flagged and people push back and maybe they go back to court. I don't know, but they're going to try to figure this out. And Joe also had another good nugget about the game, the EA Sports game, and how that ultimately, how people are getting compensated from that. We'll get to that a little bit later in the program. We got Bill Bender here coming up, which very, very excited about that. This is the third time I've talked to Bill, so in the last day and a half. So I'm excited to keep this conversation rolling with him, talk maybe a little bit about this, but some bigger stuff, maybe jump into the Michigan bit a little bit, and then also actually real college football stories moving forward. But before we get to Bill, I want to tell you all about parents and athletes, our friends over at Export. Protect what matters most with Export mouth guards, trusted by professional athletes, designed by NHL team dentists. Export mouth guards are scientifically tested to help absorb those high impact hits, protecting both your teeth and your brain. Export mouth guards feature 3 layers of advanced protection, including a patented use of carbon fiber that they custom 3D print that bad boy right to your grill for more protection, better comfort, clear communication, and max performance. So you can focus on your game, not on your gear. Do not take chances with your safety. Visit exportguards.com/Bobby today and save 15% on your order. Export, protect what matters most. Bill Bender, the sporting news, coming up next.
Creative, experience, results. That's what drives growth. That's what builds brands. That's Lake Spur Marketing, a full-service agency built on trust, strategy, and performance, not fluff. From bold strategies to flawless execution, every campaign is rooted in smart planning and driven by clear goals. We don't chase clicks. We build partnerships. We show up, dig in, and deliver every single time. Lake Spur Marketing. The proof is in our partners.
Welcome back in the Bobby Carpenter Show, and happy to welcome in our guy, Bill Bender. Third time I've talked to him in about the last 36 hours. And so we've been diving in a lot of the different things. Bill, I know you jump on media outlets all across the country. You're always doing interviews. You're always writing. You're always working, doing some great stuff for the sporting news. Give him a follow at Bill Bender 92. What has been the reaction kind of nationally? If you want to even hop in region by region, because I know you do stuff kind of everywhere, to this house settlement and what people kind of think and how it's going to look.
Well, and like you said, we've talked 3 times, so I'm going to try to give you some different material than what I've said the last 2. That's a great point, though. I think Big Ten country, for example, Bobby, I don't know that the common college football fan really cares about this, other than that they know student athletes are getting paid now and the college football players are getting paid, but they just don't want it to impact the product on the field. I don't know. I think there's a line in this trying to become more like the NFL when they still want it to feel like college football. But at Ohio State, where it is more of a business, you saw the release that they partnered with Learfield to help with some of the NIL questions that they're going to have, the NIL business side of things. And that's what this has become. It's equal parts business and football now. I don't know if it was like that 10 to 15 years ago, but it is definitely one and the same now.
It is. And you talk about like in the Big Ten, because I think that is one thing that's been a lot different, where people here maybe were a little bit uncertain of doing this at first. And you can make the jokes that Shane Gillis made with Nick Saban on game day about how they've been paying their players all the time in the South. And maybe people are more comfortable with that as well. But it seems like, as long as it doesn't affect everything. I saw this poll up, I think 11 Warriors had on their site, where do you agree with Ross Bjork's decision to come out and say we're going to keep 36 varsity sports? And overwhelmingly, I think there's a couple hundred people. It wasn't the biggest sample in the world, but it was about 73%, somewhere in there, that said they agree with that. And, on the flip side of that, less than 30 would say no. And I see these budgets, and I was reading like articles on how people are operating at deficits, and now you're pulling $20 million. I worry in 5 years that the college athletic environment isn't going to look nearly the same as it did for the last 50.
Well, and that's the trial and error here. How much does football impact everything else? How much do they pour that number that we're seeing a lot of, the 21 million that every, the schools are going to get to distribute? That's not NIL money either. That is 21 million. That's separate from that. Then NIL comes on top of that. So again, I think schools like Ohio State are going to be able to operate in that space. Will they be able to support 36 schools for the next 5 years? We'll see. That is a concern of mine too, because I love football. I love college basketball. And those are the two that are going to drive this thing. but I like watching the other sports as well. I mean, we'll have the College World Series on the TV and those kind of things, and you want high school athletes to have as many chances to play as many sports as possible. Not everybody, as the line from the program goes, Bobby, not everybody can play football. And, you want kids to have a chance to play other sports.
Absolutely. And the last couple of years, you saw Michigan win a national championship last year. Ohio State won it this year. The Final Four consist of, Texas, they were in the SEC, but they were in the Big 12 until last year. So I don't know if I really define them as like a true SEC team, no more than I defined Oregon. And watching UCLA in the World Series thinking, it's a Big 10 power in UCLA. So it feels a little weird. But of the Final Four teams last year, you had Notre Dame that beat Georgia to ultimately, on their way there. They beat Penn State, who was in the Final Four. You have Ohio State there, and then Texas. And it seems like some of the balance of power had shifted to the north with this. Notre Dame isn't in the Big Ten, but they feel a lot like a Big Ten team with kind of how they operate. And so do you think that this is something that is a trend that will continue, or do you think that this settlement will kind of sway things back a little bit?
Well, I think for the blue blood programs, and it's interesting you bring that up, Bobby, that Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State were the semifinalists last year. Texas has got a ton of money to work with. These are schools that are established football powerhouses that have a system in play where not only is it an attractive place to go play football and go to college, they develop for the NFL well, and they've clearly got the business side of this part figured out. They've got plenty of money. I'm reading stories about how much money the other side of it is. I'm reading stories about how much money Texas Tech has, for example. So in 5 years, is Texas Tech going to be the dominant football program because student athletes are coming there for the money? I do like what Ryan Day says when he talks about if you're coming here for money, this is the wrong place. Now, some people might roll their eyes at that, but why do you come to Ohio State? What is your goal? It's probably to go to the NFL, like so many players have in the last 25 years, pretty much since John Cooper really got this school going as an NFL football factory. And that should be the priority over, just coming for money. Plus you're going to school just in case the NFL thing doesn't work out.
Yeah, there's still that school thing, Bill, that pesky school thing
Right.
always gets in the way, where we call them, student athletes versus employees, and getting, hammering in on the verbiage right there. And that's one of the fine balances here that they've held off on the employee status. And I think that there would be positives if they did that, but I think there's also negatives, because once you become an employee, Bill, as you and I both know, like, then you're working for someone else. This isn't an arrangement kind of how it's always been. And do you think it would benefit the game? We have the schools, we've got the game, and we've got the players. If they were to go to employees, who do you think would benefit from that? And what do you think some of the drawbacks would potentially be?
Well, I asked you this question on Sirius yesterday where, I was asking you and Jacob Hester, I was like, when you played, didn't you already feel like an employee? When, it had to feel like it. Yeah, everybody said, well, football shouldn't feel like a job. It's football. But you were doing that. A considerable amount of your time was spent playing football and doing the things necessary to be a football player at Ohio State. And, to me, it does make sense, at least not knowing the entire business side of it, that you should make football players employees at this point. You should have them sign 2-year contracts. That eliminates the transfer portal. I know Schlegs and I and you have talked about all of that in depth on this show, where that eliminates the transfer portal coming and going a little bit on a year-to-year basis. And, then you're going to the school for the right reasons. So I'd be naive to say that college football hasn't become a lot more like the NFL. And I do worry with high school kids overestimating what they're worth if that becomes a thing where it gets out of hand. I think this $21 million will help with that, but the jury's still out on what it looks like in 5 years.
So basically in college, Bill, I'll tell you this, and I probably should have pointed this out yesterday. My time allotment spent was more or less similar to the NIL breakdown model, like 75% football, maybe 10 to 15% on what would they they're calling men's basketball. I would call that socializing and the social elements of college. And then maybe like the last 10%, 10 to 5% on academics and on doing things that better the community and society. And so I wish I did feel like a job, but I kind of liked it like that. I enjoyed it. But we would always then joke with the coaches about the 20-hour rule. And like, if you become an employee, like, dude, there's no 20-hour rule. Like, and they're probably already past that at this point now. All the restrictions that they have as far as, time on field, time in training room, what you're able to do with the ball. Like, if you become an employee, I mean, yeah, you can collectively bargain some of that, but there's going to be an expectation that a lot more of those things are occurring a lot more often.
Well, I was just going to ask, what the 20-hour rule is there, and when you were playing, obviously, but that doesn't count film at home, does it? That doesn't count treatment.
Well, they would have,
yeah.
I mean, Bill, they would have like weight room. They would have discretionary time, which they still do. Like, the weight room's open. Hey, meeting rooms are open. And I'll never forget, I walked in on my freshman year. Our linebacker coach, Mark Snyder, is talking to Matt Wilhelm, who's our senior linebacker, All-American. And he's saying, like, Matt, you haven't been to class like all quarter, tresses up my rear end about this. Like, you've got to get there. And, after Snyder talks to him, he's like, yeah, I'll get it. I'll make sure my grades are good. Like, and he was a good student. And Matt was really smart. So he's like, I don't need to go to all this stuff. I'm a senior. I'll figure it out. And I remember when he walked out and I was like, Matt, dude, like, you don't go to class? Like, he's like, I used to. He's like, Bobby, we're trying to win a national championship. He's like, do you think me going to whatever class versus watching an extra hour of film? He's like, what's more important? He's like, wouldn't you rather win? I'm like, yeah, I guess that is true. And Fick used to always tell us then later, he's like, discretionary time is your time. But you know what else is discretionary? Playing time and winning. And so there was never like an overt get in here, make sure you do your stuff, but also make sure that you're taking care of your business and your responsibilities to the team.
Right. And in 2025, how much more are we doing? Where, I think high school players' time is intense. I mean, it's June and you're seeing pictures of, high school players doing the lifting, doing the high school, the camp circuit, the helmets are on already, and some, those kind of things. So I think it is in some ways at least part-time job, in some ways a full-time job in the fall, there's no doubt. And you're trying to do classwork and doing the things necessary. So this is still college football and still the NFL. But, it really comes down to what I was telling you earlier, Bobby. I'm just not sure, at least my friends, like they, unless it impacts the product on the field, they're not bent out of shape about the House ruling. They're not going to give me 2 pages of text on the House ruling this morning. I think it's just, we accept and know that college football athletes are being paid, and we like that, but we don't want it to somehow ruin the product on the field. And that's the balance I think everybody's dealing with right now.
So that's the balance they're dealing with. Because it's funny, I hear people complain about it, but Bill, if you go look at the television numbers, like,
right,
it would tell you that you may not like it, and you can complain about the service at the restaurant all you want, but you still go back and you're eating dinner there every Saturday.
Correct. And I don't think there was anything wrong with the regular season last year. I do, and we've talked about it at length, that I do want to shorten the postseason a little bit. And, I talked to Bo Bishop about this on 97.1 this morning. When you hear Ryan Day talking about 4 guaranteed playoff berths, I don't necessarily agree with it, because I've told you I'd rather seed them 1 through 16, but I understand where he's coming from, because with this House ruling, there is the added element that, are the SEC teams and Big Ten teams, these schools that we've just talked about, going to zoom past everyone else? And if that's the case, why should the playing field be equal? And that's something I've been talking about for years. So if Ryan Day wants the Big Ten to have 4 guaranteed playoff berths, it's rooted out of protection of the conference, because that those are the schools that are going to invest more in this, especially now that this ruling is passed.
All right, we're going to take a quick break with Bill, because I'm going to bring back, and I'm going to ask you something about that 5 and 11 model versus the 4-4-2-2-1-3 or whatever model as well, and see if I can't convince you, if I can give you another added benefit, would it be able to change your mind? With that coming up with Bill Bender, the Sporting News, next. All right, back here on the Bobby Carpenter Show with our guy Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Go check out all the great stuff he does there. He's all over the airwaves, all over the country, doing a great job. And I'm more Bill, like, hey, put one group of 5 team in and then take the next 15 teams. I think that's good. However, like, what will that do for scheduling? I know people want a firmer number when it comes to like strength of schedule. And ironically, I think you've spoken to this before, where everybody hates the committee. But if you go back and look at the committee, and then they can put the BCS numbers and run the calculations with it, they've been pretty similar here the last 11 years.
Oh, yeah. In the 4-team era, there was one or two where you could have put this team in over this team, and it was the same in the BCS era. I didn't think they really missed within the format. But the complaining is, I think Ivan Maisel said this once, is like, once we go to 16, people are going to want 17. That's just the way college football works. In general, the format has worked. The 12 teams that we had in last year, we can complain about the seeding, which they fixed. But was SMU more deserving of Alabama? Probably. Based on the parameters in which this playoff is played, they were. So, unless you want the same 16 teams in the playoff every year, which I don't. So I think as we get into this, and the assumption is we are going to 16, I just want to perfect this model, make sure it's right. Now, I'll let you pitch what this benefit is of one of these models, and maybe we can change my mind a little bit.
So I think the Big Ten and SEC, interestingly enough, usually the SEC is all in lockstep. Coaches, administrators, Greg Sankey, everybody. And they came out of their meetings, and you heard Greg Sankey talking about the 4 automatic qualifiers. ADs, I think we're talking about that because they had talked with Tony Petitti, and the Big Ten was all about it. And they were going to maybe say, hey, well, because I think that the administration, they'd rather have certainty with this when they get how many teams they get in. And with that, the SEC was going to go to 9 conference games, and they were going to have that like Big Ten SEC partnership of scheduling where they would try to schedule up as many games as possible. And the coaches didn't like that. They wanted to just go 5-11, and I don't blame them. Like, hey, maybe we can get more teams in with this, which I think could be a possibility. But if I could give you, Bill, the non-conference SEC Big Ten Challenge yearly, would you be on board more for the 4 automatic qualifiers from the SEC and Big Ten?
If that's taken into account, yeah. And especially if the SEC goes to 9 conference games and then they do an extra game. And then if you want to make it that way, I would consider it. But my point has been that they're normally going to get 4 in anyway. But also, if we do that SEC Big Ten Challenge, I probably don't watch it with as much passion as I used to. I used to love the ACC Big Ten Basketball Challenge. Now it's a little confusing because it's like 3 nights, but you would take some pride in that. And I think the SEC Big Ten Football Challenge would be amazing. I would do it in week 2, right after the opener. Everybody can play a group of 5 school in the opener if they want. Get your tune up however you want to do it. But you can picture Ohio State at LSU or Michigan at Texas, which we did last year. And I was at that Michigan-Texas game last year, and I'll be there here in week 1 this year with Ohio State. The pregame environment was very cool for that because you saw a lot of Texas fans. They didn't like overrun the stadium, but there were enough of them running around Ann Arbor that you're like, they've never been here before. Like, yeah. How many Ohio State fans have been down to Tiger Stadium? How many Ohio State fans have been to, Jordan Hare Stadium in Auburn? I think those are the experiences that I think really would be part of an SEC Big Ten Challenge that make it very palatable for me, especially if you factor it, you don't penalize them for playing in those games.
Well, and I think you saw that last year or last like handful of years with Notre Dame and the ACC. They started having that. Clemson's playing up there. Like, Clemson fans are going to Notre Dame to watch. They had that Georgia series. Did they play right. Georgia? Yeah. So all those Georgia fans, like, I know this, when Ohio State played Texas in 2006, everybody wanted to get down there and go see that and go watch their team. So like you said, they've got the home and home with Bama coming up, the home and home with Georgia. Like, there will be a ton of fans that go there. That's what I look at, Bill, is like for the good of the sport. Like, how I know that they might get a little weird on the backside of it because the people want some certainties. I'm willing to trade a little bit of that to be able to have some of these big, awesome non-conference matchups in home sites. I don't need to go play the team in Heinz Field or go play them at, Paul Brown Stadium or wherever it is. Like that's fine. It's all well and good. But I'd rather see some home action because doesn't the home environment make everything for college football?
Absolutely. And that's part of it. And now I'm okay with some on location,
Yeah.
early season games. I've been to the Chick-fil-A kickoff game a couple times. They produce some really good games, but you're in this to watch, imagine Ohio State week 2 at the Swamp. I've never seen that game. I don't think, have they ever played at Florida? I'm not sure not in my lifetime. No. Or Florida coming up here. Unfortunately for the Big Ten schools, I think you do have to do this one in September. You're not going to get Florida to come up to Ohio State on November 17th, 2 weeks before the Michigan game. But I'll trade that off as long as we get those early season matchups. I would be on board with it. I don't think there would be fatigue with it because I think both of those conferences take so much pride, and that's where the jabs are back and forth the most, that it could be a hugely successful event.
Well, Bill, I think we already saw it. You do get the backside of it now, as long as you're good and hey, put the first 2 rounds of the playoffs home sites. And if you can find a way to win, then you might have a team, as we saw this year from the South, whether it's SMU going to Penn State or Tennessee coming up to Columbus. I mean, you get some of those cool venues where the weather does matter. So I know we're working through a lot here. The Big Ten moved like the ice age for a long time. And now all of a sudden they're on the Autobahn and trying to just cruise along. And there's going to be some potholes along the way. And I'm hoping that we can kind of manage that as much as we can. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll leave you on this. Last year when Tennessee played Ohio State, when I was pulling into the parking garage, a Tennessee fan pulled in next to me. And partially, I think they thought they were going to win that game. And I'm like, well, where'd you drive in from? They said Atlanta. He's pulling on the Reggie White Tennessee jersey. So that got my attention, obviously. But, they were excited to see the stadium. They were excited to walk around and look at all the things because I do think at those Big Ten places, the special places, the SEC places, again, Ohio State, imagine walking around the Grove before taking on Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. I think Ohio State fans who appreciate the history and traditions of these games, the stuff that we're trying to cling on to, would really get into that.
So last year I went to Oklahoma, LSU, and Georgia, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Just seeing where the stadium is relative to campus. Like Georgia, it's literally smack dab in the middle of campus, and people tailgate in front of the classrooms. It would be like where the Oval is. Put the stadium where the Oval is, limited parking except for a couple garages, and people just park and pull up in front of different classrooms and fraternities and just have drinks on the lawn. It's crazy.
Why not? Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there is a Ohio State fan that wouldn't enjoy that environment if they got in a home with the Bulldogs, which they have very shortly.
Absolutely. Bill, we appreciate the time. Hopefully I'll be on a week-long reprieve from you. I know maybe you're a week-long reprieve from me, but it's always awesome to spend some time with you. I love picking your brain on all this stuff, having great conversations. Have a great rest of the Tuesday and hopefully enjoy a little sunshine and warmth here.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you Monday, Bobby. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. That's Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Go check his stuff out there. They do an awesome job. He's one of the most knowledgeable guys you'll find, and obviously a great dude as well. I want to tell you about my friends over at Backer, BCKR. It's a brand new product for Ohio State sports apparel. Premium product, premium pricing. It's awesome, though. It's the elite golf, fishing, hunting, skiing gear that you've always wanted. You put it on, man, this stuff feels really good. Windbreakers are awesome. The hats are great. The rain gear, the cold gear, it's all there for you. It's bckr.com. You got that Blocko on there. They partner with Ohio State. A portion of the proceeds are going back to the student athletes, as we were talking about NIL and everything else with this. So that's going to be a component of it as well. And here's the best part. When you order it now, you can get it for Father's Day, some free expedited shipping, BOBBY, all caps at checkout, free expedited shipping, courtesy of our friends at Backer. So listen, Father's Day is here. They've got some great stuff. Go check them out as well. All right, we got our headlines here coming up next.
Create it, experience, results. That's what drives growth. That's what builds brands. That's Lake Spur Marketing, a full-service agency built on trust, strategy, and performance, not fluff. From bold strategies to flawless execution, every campaign is rooted in smart planning and driven by clear goals. We don't chase clicks. We build partnerships. We show up, dig in, and deliver every single time. Lake Spur Marketing. The proof is in our partners.
All right, welcome in to the Bobby Carpenter Show. And listen, if you're watching right now, please like, subscribe, leave your questions, comments. Always loving the chat. We've got Tailgate Talk coming up next. We're going to get a chance to answer your questions. And without Schlegs here, listen, it's just me talking to you out there. So I really appreciate it. I want to tell you about our friends over at Lake Spur Marketing, great partner of this program. They're a full service ad agency built on trust, on strategy, on performance, the things that you want, the stuff that you need. The Lake Spur team has the experience, over 100 total years in experience. They eliminate waste. They deliver on budget. They also shield your team from the outside noise, the cold callers, and let you do what you do best. Work on your business, grow your business. They will help you do that. They don't chase clicks. They build partnerships. Lake Spur Marketing, the proof is in the partners. All right, now we have our headlines coming up here. And we're talking a little bit about this right at the top, Pat. The OSU we've got two things here. I want to save the new EA, the EA royalty system moving forward, but they have the team rankings, courtesy of 11 Warriors. And everywhere you look, Ohio State's 2025 schedule is among top 20 strongest in college football. For teamrankings.com, it's number 2. They've got Texas, Ohio State. And ironically, those guys are going to be lined up. And why do you think they're going to be lined up beside each other? Well, because they're playing each other. And so you have two great teams in there. Penn State's on there. Well, Ohio State's playing them. So that's going to make sense, obviously, as well. For ESPN, it's number 18. Probably a little low. I think when you're Ohio State and you start talking about some of the teams that you ultimately have to play this year, which I think they have Illinois on the schedule as well, who's a dark horse playoff team. You start looking at Michigan, they'll be better than they were last year. That's always obviously a rivalry, tough game. Texas, Penn State, going to be pretty tough. And then for Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, he has them at 21. Now, I would say that that's even lower, but you start looking at it. I mean, they've got 4 or 5 really big games, and that's gonna kind of be the turning of their season. If you find a way to go 10-2, 11-1, bake the Big Ten championship, win it. I mean, you get that home, get the bye, or if you're in the top 8, which honestly, that home game in the playoffs was freaking awesome. I'd almost rather be, in that 5 to 8 block if you could, to be able to find a way to get there as opposed to being one of the first 4. Now, I know the coaches would love a bye and get to the second round, but home field games for anybody that went to Ohio State last year realizes how absolutely tremendous that is and the feeling that it had and the energy behind it. So Ohio State has the schedule there that, what's going to give them a little grace. 10-2 probably gets you a home game. 11-1, that might get you a bye, and depending on what you obviously do in the conference championship game. But I honestly, winning the Big Ten would be great, but I can't wait till they get to 16 where you win the conference, you automatically are going to get a home game. I mean, that doesn't need to be an auto bid. That's just going to be the case for the Big Ten. And they've got a tough schedule. They're going to have a tough schedule. Ross and Ryan have put this together, and Gene was a part of doing this before where, hey, we're playing SEC schools. You're going to have the Big Ten locked in. I wish they had, some of the bigger hits. The fact that it's taken forever to play USC stinks, but they do have some great teams on there. And because of that, Ohio State will have a tough schedule. And honestly, this team will be battle tested, and that'll be good. And you may take a little lump at some point in there. But that's okay in this. And it doesn't mean you don't want to win every week, but this is the best part of maybe the expanded playoff is if you lose, it means a lot to you emotionally, and it means a lot to me emotionally, but it doesn't just bury your team in their ability to ultimately chase down a championship. And so that's good with everything else. And so that's it for our headlines today. We're running a little long. We got our tailgate talk. We'll answer a couple of your questions here coming up next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Oh, goodness. Thank you for checking in with the show with me. Schlegs is going to be out all week. I appreciate everybody watching and contributing into the chat. We've got our tailgate talk brought to you by our friends at Real Truck. So we appreciate all of the juice. I'm trying to bring it. I know you guys say I look angry. Sometimes I'm just sleepy. And I guess when Schlegs goes on his monologue, sometimes they put me to sleep. Hopefully they don't do that for you. I have to hear him though all the time. Steely Matt had a good question in here. He said, how are they going to decide which sports to stop? Revenue generated or cost of operating each individual sport? And so, from my understanding of it, they've kind of tiered off sports into a couple different tiers, maybe 3 or 4 different tiers. And I think there's like looking at it as some of it importance, historical performance. Like, here's the thing. A lot of people have cut their men's track program. Why would you not cut them? Why would you cut the men's track program at Ohio State? To save money. But you also have, in my estimation, the greatest track athlete of all time from an impact standpoint who went to Ohio State in Jesse Owens. And so, like, historically, like, dude, you can't shutter the Ohio State track program. I mean, this is the guy that stood up to Hitler and the Nazis in Berlin, Germany in 1936. And so while a lot of other people could maybe say, we'll cut the track program, like, dude, like, you have an immense amount of pride in that. And so the question is it revenue generated or is it cost of operating? Well, if you have revenue generated and cost of operating, that's expense. And so you can look at it and say, well, where are you at on the red? If you're not generating very much and you're costing a lot, well, that's going to be a big delta, a big deficit right there. If you don't cost a whole lot, but you don't really make a whole lot. Okay. Maybe you make a lot, but you also cost a lot. And so they'll try to figure that out. But it's a fine line here of trying to balance this and put it together as they try to figure all this out and balance it. Because I don't have a crystal ball. People are going to be ticked off regardless of what you do. And that's what Ross has got to deal with. So I know that stinks for him. But there is no, perfect science to being able to do this. You got to figure it out. I know, like I said, they have these tiers. Now, I'm not privy to see what the tiers are. And here's the other thing. You have facilities now. And so, you're going to just shutter. The tennis program is really good. And, Coach Todd raised a ton of money to build that facility. And you had people over there that were wanting to give to it and wanting to keep it afloat. And so, hey, you may have to have other people donate and try to keep it going. But if you shut it down, well, what's going to go in there? You have indoor tennis courts, 5, 6 of them, whatever it is. You have a beautiful outdoor tennis center. You have an unbelievable natatorium and a strong history of swimming. And so this is the problem in here at Ohio State. You have a new base. I say new. It's last 20-year-old baseball field, new softball field's just about the same. You redid the track when you moved it over there. You just built a lacrosse stadium. The lacrosse team, by the way, was in the NCAA tournament, won the Big Ten tournament for the first time. You have a new wrestling center over at Covelli, and you've had a national championship wrestling program here in the last 10 years. Like, it's just, I don't know. I wish I had a good answer because to me, it's not just about dollars. And some of those coaches, like, they're hustlers too. You talk about Nick Myers and what he's been able to do and raise money, and Tom Ryan and what he's been able to do with Coach Todd at tennis. Like, those guys have raised a lot of those dollars themselves to keep them afloat and to make sure that they're competitive. So I wish I had a good answer for you with how this ultimately works. You can do dollars and cents, and that's one way to do it. Have a blended thing with, like, hey, rank the sports in terms of importance to the school. And then also, what do they cost? If we're going to eliminate it, is it actually going to save us much money? So, like, there's going to be a little trying to figure that out. And I know they don't want to try to cut any. It's how competitive sometimes do you want to be, what resources you're going to give to the coach and obviously to the players. So they've got to figure that out and balance it. It's interesting. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of facilities, as they mentioned. Gene spent a lot on them. Andy Geiger spent, more before him. I mean, the basketball arena being one that, costs a lot to operate. Even though you make revenue in basketball, the expenses are really high. So I don't think people realize that it's not near the gross of what you were looking for, or the net of what you were looking for. But that's it for this edition of Tailgate Talk. Thanks for firing some of those questions in the interaction. I really appreciate it with everything going on. All right, coming up next, we're going to wrap up the show with the parting thoughts. It's amazing. Starting the show, I always wonder, how am I going to be able to do a show by myself for, 45 minutes? And now I always going longer than I did with Schlags, which is absolutely crazy. I want to get the parting thoughts in here. Pat, I don't know if you're able to find it. I got it to you a little late. I apologize. But my son got baptized on Sunday. We talked about that. I give him a lot of credit because before that, for his birthday present, he wanted to go whitewater rafting. We go down to a place in southern Ohio on the Ohio River, which is a hidden gem down there. There's a lot of lakes in Ohio, and they're packed. You go on the river, it's not a lot of folks. And so we go down there, we boat a little bit on Friday, go to the New River Gorge and go rafting, come back, do a little more boating, get some pizza, hang out, have some cocktails, watch a movie, sit in the hot tub, go to bed, and drive back home. And he went to bust it back home ultimately for his baptism, because that was something that he wanted to be able to do. And so, yeah, this was it. From the guys, our guide Ray was absolutely amazing. He's gone with us a couple different times now. But anytime you can have fun with the kids on the water, making memories and enjoying that, it was a blast. So I'd encourage anybody to do it. You want to do some stuff, activities outside, go down to the New River Gorge, the lower New, the gully, upper or lower, depending on your desire of fitness and what you want to get out of it, but enjoy it. That's it for today's show. We got Joshua Perry coming at you tomorrow. Stay locked in for the Bobby Carpenter Show.